Chapter 2 Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, two children left their home and walked into the wide, wild world. The land was dark as Hansel and Gretel made their way across level turf beyond the palace moat. They had never left the palace by themselves before, and they knew little of the great world beyond its walls. But they had been frightened by what their father had done. They believed firmly in their little hearts that parents should not kill their children, and that were resolved to punish theirs by going out and finding a family that was nice as a family should be. But how find such family, though? They had no option but to walk and walk and walk until they came across one. So they did walk, and on, until the firm ground became softer under their feet. Soon they found themselves in a mist of muck-thick swamp, where the will-o'-the-wisp danced and the bullfrogs croaked. They became frightened, but they went on. When the sun came up the next morning, and the swamp then showed no signs of coming to an end, Gretel began to worry. "I think we'll be lost forever," she said. Hansel said, "And there's no food anywhere." But Hansel was wrong, for just then the two children saw a marvelous sight. There was a house right in the center of the swamp. Its walls were colored in chocolate cake, and the roof was glittered with icing. Slowly, the two hungry travelers approached it. "I'm hungry," Gretel said. "Me too," Hansel said. "It looks like cake," Hansel said. "It smells like cake," Gretel said. "Let's eat it," Hansel cried. Gretel tried to argue, but her mouth was already full of the fudgy, moist chocolate cake. Just then the door flew open and a woman with a baker's apron appeared on the front step. "Who's eating my house?" she bellowed. Hansel hid a handful of chocolate cake behind his back. Gretel had chocolate cake all over her face. "No one?" Hansel said. Gretel nodded, swallowing. But the baker woman's face softened when she saw the two children. "You must be lost in the middle of the swamp all by yourselves. Are you hungry?" Gretel nodded and tried to sneak another handful of cake from the walls of the house. "Well, don't eat my house," the baker woman laughed. "Come in and I'll fix you a proper breakfast." So the two children came in, and she made them goose eggs and wild boar bacon and good thick brown German bread. Having walked all night, that the kindly baker woman put them in her bed and let them sleep all day. When they woke up, a wonderful meal of sausages and potatoes and cold milk were laid before them. "But I'm not hungry," Gretel said. "Oh, you must eat up and regain your strength," the baker woman told them. So the children ate, and the food was delicious. The baker woman asked the children what their names were. "This is Gretel," Hansel said as he shoved the disgusting amount of potatoes in his mouth. "And I'm her brother, Hansel." The baker woman wanted to know how they come to her house. They were careful not to let her know that they were royalty, lest she returned to the castle back to their murderous parents. But they did tell her that their parents had cut their heads off, which the baker woman did not believe. And that they were looking for a kind family where no one would ever do that to them again. "And where we can eat cake whenever we want?" Gretel asked hopefully. The baker woman smiled and brought forth an enormous piece of chocolate cake. "Hooray!" Hansel cried. Gretel shoved a fistful into her mouth. The two children stayed with the baker woman for many weeks. Every day, they ate 3 enormous meals, plus a snack in between lunch and dinner, and one before bedtime. They could eat whatever they want, and they did. Gretel shoved chocolate cake into her mouth, curiously smearing it into the pink cheeks like war paint. Hansel wasn't much better. One night, as the children laid in bed with the most horrible of stomach aches, Gretel said to his sister, "Do you think this is heaven? The baker woman does all the work, and we can eat as much as we like, and we never have to do anything." "This must be heaven," Gretel said. And Hansel said, "Gretel, do you miss our parents?" Gretel tried to think about it, but she couldn't tell. She was too busy eating the wall. This wasn't heaven, of course, for as you all know, the baker woman was planning to eat them. But she wasn't a witch. The brothers Grimm called her a witch, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, she was just a regular woman who discovered sometime around the birth of her second child that while she did like chicken, and she liked beef and pork, what she really, really liked was child. I bet you could figure how that one happened. When I was little, my mother used to say, "Oh, you look so cute. Look at those little arms. Look at those little legs. Look at that little tushy." That was my mother's word for bottom. And then she said, "I'm going to eat you up." And she said it like she meant it. Has your parents ever said something to you like that? Most parents say that kind of thing all the time, you know. It's totally normal. Just be careful that they don't let them actually taste you. Well, the baker's woman's children tasted so good to her that she decided to spend the rest of her trying to find others to devour. She liked them nice and plump. She always made them sure to fatten them up before she ate them. That's why she treated Hansel and Gretel like this. Why else would she allow them to wallow all day, do nothing, work for nothing, nothing to learn? Why else trap them in a house of chocolate cake and let them eat until their heart's content, never warning them that we become fat and lazy like pigs in a sty? Parents are supposed to help their children grow healthy and strong. The baker woman was doing the opposite, plying the children with so much food and giving them so little to do that they would become weak, dull, and heavy. Dull enough, Gretel did not question when the baker woman asked her to clean out the large, mysterious cage in the back of the house, and then slammed the door shut on her. Heavy enough that Hansel didn't feel like going outside to see where his sister's gone. Weak enough when the baker woman told Hansel that they'd be fattening Gretel up just for one more week, and that when they would eat her, Hansel could do nothing about it. And then the day came to eat Gretel. "I think we'll roast her," the baker woman said. "Little rosemary, some salt. We'll put her in the oven for about 3 to 4 hours. And then the meat will positively fall right off the bone." She brought the fat Hansel down to the basement, stood an enormous oven. "You need to check to see if it's hot enough, sweetie," the baker woman said. "I'm going to start heating it when you get inside, and when I smell your skin roasting, I know it'll be ready for your sister." She then shoved Hansel inside and closed the oven door behind him. The oven became hotter and hotter, and Hansel began to sweat. Then a delicious smell wafted into his nostrils. "Oh no," he thought. "I'm cooking." He sniffed the air. And I smelled delicious. But he wasn't cooking. It was just the remainder of leg goose that he hidden in his trouser pocket for last night's dinner, and had forgot to eat it before he fell asleep. So hot in the oven that his skin was crinkling, and the baker woman could smell it too. She came down and opened the oven door. "Are you cooking yet?" she asked. But Hansel shook his head and took another bite of the goose leg. The baker woman frowned and closed the oven door. Probably should have said yes, he thought. Oh well. He finished the goose leg and continued to sweat. Soon another delicious smell rose to his nostrils. Oh no, he thought. Now I'm cooking for certain. He sniffed the air. And I smelled delicious. But he wasn't cooking. It was 3 strips of bacon that he tucked into his socks at breakfast. It was so hot in the oven that the fat was sizzling and popping. The baker woman smelled it too. She came down and opened the oven door. Are you cooking yet? She asked. But Hansel shook his head and ate the 2nd strip of bacon. The baker woman frowned and closed the door. I probably should have said yes, he thought. Oh well. Hansel finished off the bacon and continued to sweat. Soon yet another delicious smell rose to his nostrils. Oh no, he thought. I must be cooking now. And I smell delicious, just like chocolate cake. This time I was right. He was cooking. And he did smell like chocolate cake, because he has eaten so much of it since coming to the baker woman's house. The baker woman smelled him cooking, came downstairs and opened a door. Are you cooking yet? She asked. But Hansel shook his head. I don't think it's hot enough in here, he shrugged. That smells just like some chocolate cake I stuffed in my undies. It's not hot enough in there, the baker woman huffed. Let me see. She crawled into the oven, pushing Hansel out of the way. Feels plenty of hot to me, she said. Hansel crawled out of the oven while the baker woman was crawling in. He looked at her, pink and meaning and sweating, sitting in the enormous oven. Hey! She shouted. What are you doing? Something didn't flipped in his food-obsessed brain. I'm saving myself and my sister from another terrible parent. And then he closed the door and locked it. Hey, let me out! The baker woman shouted at him. Hey, you stupid kid! Let me out! Hansel stared through the great oven door at her. The baker woman began to sweat more. Her face was burning. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm sorry for what I've done. I don't want to die. Just let me out. Just let me out. Hansel's face softened. Please, please, I could die in here. I could die. Hansel began to feel sorry for her. But he certainly wasn't going to let her out. He walked upstairs, out into the back of the house, where he found Gretel sitting in a dirty cage. Are you hungry? He asked. She looked up at him. There's dinner in the oven, he added. But Gretel wasn't hungry. And besides, he was only kidding. Now, that's not that bad of a story, right? It's a crime. Sure. And it's the only part of Hansel and Gretel's story that anybody knows. Yeah, they nearly get eaten by a cannibalistic baker woman is bad, but not nearly as what's bad is to come. Speaking of which, the little kids might have liked that one. Or at least probably sat through it without screaming their little heads off. In fact, any little kid who hears this story will be just fine. Hi, little kids. But things get much worse from on here. So, why don't you go hire a babysitter and read the rest of this thing alone? End the chapter 2.